It's been 1 year since the deadliest attack on Jews since the Holocaust, when Hamas terrorists landed in all parts of Israel for one purpose, and that was to kill the Jewish people. Hello, I'm Adrienne Batra. With me are Brian Lilley and Warren Kinsella. There's no great way of presenting that, Warren, because the deadliest attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust, that fateful day on October 7th, was so horrific, so terrifying, and the reverberations from that day continue to resonate today. All three of us went to Israel. We visited the kibbutzes. We saw the burnt out homes. You saw and witnessed the atrocities that Hamas committed against the Jewish people, what they did to babies, to women, to children. And all of this is still, there are over 100 people that have been kidnapped and are still remaining hostage to this day by Hamas. Yet Israel is succeeding in their campaign against eradicating Hamas, but now others are stepping in where Hamas may have been laid to waste. From your perspective, this has been a year of turmoil and unrest, and I want to know from your perspective where we are now, a year later.
Well, where we are now, where I am now, I'm outside the Beth Shalom synagogue, and they are inside now celebrating the start of the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, where people say Shana Tova. And behind me, you may periodically see, like Adrienne, Brian, there are a ton of police and security here. I don't want to film them to give away their positions, but the Jewish community in Toronto, again, it's been reported there's a significant threat against them today. And that, to me, is the answer to your question. What has happened since the 7th of last year, this long year the Jewish community and civilization in the West has experienced, is the problem has grown worse. In Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, Winnipeg, schools for little kids being firebombed and shot up, synagogues and community centers being firebombed, restaurants, businesses, and the common element in every case, they're owned by and populated by Jews, our brothers and sisters, our neighbors in this Canada. And that's not the Canada that I grew up in. That's not the Canada that we aspire to be. Mm-hmm. And so we need to fight back. And I'm proud to work for a news organization and an editor like you and with a colleague like Brian, where we are fighting back. But some days it seems like the struggle is pretty grim, but we can't give up.
Brian, it was maybe 12 hours. There was global condemnation of Hamas's acts. But within another 12 hours, the tide turned. The protests started in the streets. The pro-Hamas forces were out, chanting "River to the Sea," "Death to Jews." We've seen repeated attempts to quiet the voices of those that are pushing back against this. You have been covering this for over a year now. You've gone to the protests. You've gone and covered our law enforcement agencies that are responsible for tamping some of this down. Not doing a very good job, but that's the case. I'm wondering from your perspective, in over a year, covering it globally, covering it locally, where do things stand?
We are still at a point where our Jewish brothers and sisters are feeling under attack. They are feeling like the police services do not support them. And I don't blame them, because I was out of town. I was not in Toronto when the attacks of October 7th happened. I was out of town visiting family. And I came back. So the attacks happened October 7th. October 9th, I'm driving back into the city center. And I'm coming up, for people that know Toronto, I'm coming off the Gardiner, coming up through Bay Street and past Toronto City Hall, and I see a giant protest gathering. And I got home, parked the car, and walked down to see what was happening. And then I walked with them for blocks upon blocks. And these were not people like we've been describing them, or not us necessarily, but some of our media colleagues have been describing them as pro-Palestinian protesters for the last year. I can tell you that October 9th of last year, which was 2 days after Hamas attacked Israel, but before Israel even replied, these were pro-Hamas protests. This is the first one that I ever saw Sarah Jama, the Hamilton Center MPP, who was, too radical for the NDP. They kicked her out because of what she had done. She was front and center in this. People were cheering on the resistance. They were cheering on the killing of women, children, seniors, and that continues to go on. And it was just the other day that I was able to ask Toronto Police Chief Myron Demke questions about this. Like, why is this still going on? What are you doing about people waving Hezbollah flags now? So now we're at the point where people are waving the flags of a banned terrorist organization out in the open. They're cheering on the Houthis. They're cheering on the Islamic Republic regime in Tehran. And our police, they're doing nothing. They claim they're doing a great job, but you talk to anyone in the Jewish community and they will tell you, no, that's not the case. We feel attacked. We feel scared. We feel like we are being targeted. Adrienne, I'm sure Warren would feel the same. If this were nonstop attacks, weekend after weekend, with people marching about, let's get Muslims, let's deal with the Islamists, we would be denouncing that, and rightly so. But also, so would every single level of government. And while I think some levels of government have done a better job than others, I think for the most part, our political class has failed. Why? Well, because it's Jews, and we don't need to worry about them. No, we do. We need to be worried when any part of our society, our culture, our fellow citizens are under attack just for who they are.
Warren, I think that's such an important layer to this. Again, reflecting on the last year and all that has unfolded, you almost have forgotten about the tents, the encampments, the summer of unrest. University professors or university presidents from Ivy League schools having to quit their jobs because they are incapable or unwilling to acknowledge the problems on their own campus, the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic chants and screams and preaching that's going on their university campuses. You almost forget about the invasion in malls, protesting at Jewish-owned restaurants, Jewish-owned bookstores, for example. You'd almost forget about those things because it's been going on for so long, it almost becomes background noise. The positive thing is some of these some of these rallies, they have lost some steam, but as the 1 year anniversary is here, the problems remain the same, the issues remain the same. We have a feckless federal liberal government that clearly is incapable or unwilling to understand the larger realities of Israel's need to succeed in this war. And I'm wondering, is there a light at the end of this tunnel? Is there another perspective that you can lend that might give some advice to the Trudeau government on how they should be dealing with this?
Well, I can tell you, some people may have forgotten what's taken place over the past year, as you put it, but I can tell you the people who are walking behind me, the Jewish families with their little kids going into that building to pray on the occasion of the start of the new Jewish New Year, they're not forgetting. They're living it. All around me are security and police to protect people who are just going to pray, to celebrate their religion with their fellow Jews. So the problem in Canada, I can tell you statistically, it's bad in Britain, it's bad in France, it's bad in the United States. One of the worst places since October 7th for anti-Semitism in the world is in Canada, measured by the appalling behavior of our government, the appalling behavior of union leaders, public sector union leaders, the appalling behavior that we're seeing in newsrooms in places like CBC and the Toronto Star, and the appalling things that we're seeing in the streets where people, Jews I was talking to this morning here, saying, I have to hide a Star of David. I can't wear it in public. I can't wear my kippah on my head because I'm going to be attacked. I'm going to be assaulted. Those things have happened here now in Canada, not in Germany in 1939, now in Canada. And it's incumbent upon all of us in the media, in the union movement, in government, to say, no, this is not how we do things. You have a right to protest if you want, but you do not have a right under our law, under our morals as a people, to demonize and hate these people just because of the religion that they have.
Brian, I don't think that our foreign affairs minister, who is just, Melanie Joly seems to be more interested in spewing Hamas talking points than she is about the previously principled stand Canada has taken with and standing with the people of Israel and Israel's right to defend itself, whatever that looks like. It's changed. Our foreign policy has changed, and I don't know if it's because of electoral issues, if it's voting bank issues, or if it's just she doesn't understand the importance of Israel's success in the region, our best and strongest ally. And now they're fighting a war on all fronts with a barrage of over 150 ballistic missiles that came Israel's way just a few days ago. Luckily, in partnership with the United States, those mostly were batted down, fortunately. But where is Canada in this? Where is our moral clarity on this?
There's zero moral clarity coming from the Trudeau government. And, I'm going to do something that might shock people. I'm not going to lay all the blame at the feet of Justin Trudeau, because when you listen to what Trudeau says and you listen to what Joly says, they're often two different things. Now, I will be clear. Trudeau should be reining in his foreign affairs minister, but she continues to go further than he does, time and time again. And when rockets and missiles were raining down on Israel from Iran, Melanie Joly was lecturing Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that is happening in the Middle East over the last year, from the October 7th attacks by Hamas, the missiles that have been launched, what is it? More than 8,000 have been launched at Israel from Hezbollah in Lebanon since October 8th of last year. The Houthi attacks, the Iranian attacks, all of those are funded and directed by the Ayatollahs, the mullahs in Tehran, part of the Islamic Republic of Iran regime. All of this is directed by them. Where is Melanie Joly calling out the mullahs and the Ayatollahs in Tehran? She's not doing it. She's lecturing Israel about proportional response. Okay, I'm going to continue to bomb you so that nearly 100,000 of your people need to be evacuated. And you and I were in the hotels, Adrienne. We saw the people that were living there back in last January when you and I were there. People who had been evacuated, they still have not gone home.
Right.
It was the same when Warren was there months later. People have not been home for a year because of the missiles that are being launched by Hezbollah in the north. They are frightened about the ongoing attacks from Hamas in the south, from the Houthis to the west of them, to the east of them. All of this continuing to go on, and all of it directed by Iran. And yet, Melanie Joly and the Trudeau government spend all their time attacking Israel and lecturing Israel. That is not where their attention needs to be at this point.
Warren, time and time again, we hear, oh, we need a two-state solution. We need to recognize Palestine as its own state. These are the steps that need to be taken in order for this to come to a conclusion. I think that those that are calling for a so-called two-state solution, I don't seem to really understand what that looks like or how that is next to impossible, Warren.
Yeah, it is impossible because the state that Canada and Norway and these other countries, Ireland, propose to recognize is run by a listed terrorist entity, Hamas. You can't recognize a state run by a terrorist. Like, that's just basic. So, I understand politicians reflexively saying ceasefire, but, and they do that about every conflict, but they seem to particularly do that when the bad guys attack, whether it's Hezbollah or Hamas or the Houthis or Iran this week, attack Israel, then they say, okay, well, now we need to have a ceasefire. And it's like, no way, Jose, sorry, that's not how it works. You just attacked our ally. You attacked our friend, a sovereign state, Israel, that is entitled under international law, no less, to defend itself.
Right.
So, the Trudeau government, they're as good as gone. As as you guys know, I grew up in a very different Liberal Party, not the Trudeau Liberal Party. They're gone. And I just, thank God that Pierre Poilievre, whatever his shortcomings are, his morality and his clarity on the issue of Israel cannot be criticized. He's very clear who he stands with, and all Canadians need to do likewise.
Moving forward, Brian, strategically, we've all learned it. We've all known it. You and I served in the Canadian forces. We all knew that the Israeli military is the most sophisticated, the most capable, the most tactical, the most arguably strategic military in the world force in the world. And one of those that was demonstrated by the pager attack. It was very specific, calculated, and targeted. I don't think any other military in the world could have pulled that off, frankly, with the intel that they had and the ability and their capabilities. And so there have been advancements. Israel has made extraordinary progress when it comes to their military strength in fighting back and eradicating Hamas and killing terrorists and basically taking out their entire, you see the org chart and who's been eliminated. And that grows by the week because one gets eliminated and they have 5 more in his wake, so to speak. So these are positive actions and positive things that Israel has done for the world to not have to deal with these lunatics. I know that in the Middle East, there are many countries who may say one thing publicly, but certainly quietly, they're like supporting Israel. You need to get this done. But I'm wondering, just long term, is this a conflict coming to an end? How does it come to an end? I mean, I suppose if we all knew that, we'd be foreign affairs experts, but your perspective on 1 year from now.
1 year from now, I think we will still not have dealt with Iran properly. I have been talking about the problems of Iran for more than a decade now. I remember interviewing John Bolton before he was Donald Trump's ambassador to the United Nations. He's someone who had served in the Bush administration. He's someone who was seen as a war hawk. And I remember talking to him about a decade ago, doing an interview with him. And I said, well, why can't we just use bunker busters to take out their nuclear capabilities? And he said, because it's too late. So he was not advocating that. But everyone knows that the real problem is Iran, but they're not willing to deal with it. That is, it's just like all the, most of the major problems that we're dealing with in Canadian cities can be pointed back to China and fentanyl, but we don't want to deal with it. Mm-hmm. In the Middle East, you look at all the problems and you say, it comes down to Iran and their desire to be the major power in the region. Well, unless the Saudis and everyone that's not Qatar, which is kind of in league with Iran, unless everybody in that region, plus Israel, plus the United States, plus those countries which are still allies, which, by the way, the Israelis no longer count Canada as allies, until they, sit up and say, we're going to deal with Iran. We're going to reduce their ability to do what they want to do to become this major power in the region. Nothing is going to change. That's what we have to deal with. As far as your comments on the Israeli military and how strong they are, how good they are, you know, I remember reading a story that said it was a more than 2-year process to get Hezbollah to buy those pagers that went off in everyone's pockets. And then over the weekend, I'm talking to someone who has got a lot more, intelligence, a lot more connections to the IDF and everything else. And they said, no, it was closer to a 10-year project to get the pagers into the hands and the pants pockets and the belt buckles of all those Hezbollah leaders so that they could send them off to find their 72 virgins and, try and find their testicles somewhere where they used to be. Like, that's how good the Israeli military is. But they need the support of their allies, their current allies, their former allies. But like I said, Canada is no longer considered an ally if you speak to people in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Okay,
last word to you, Warren. Again, in a year's time, we're going to have a new president of the United States. We'll be on the cusp of hopefully having a new prime minister in Canada. I know that you campaigned for Joe Biden, but quite frankly, every time something happens, he's the first out of the gate to call for a ceasefire, like he just did the other day. He hasn't even spoken at the time to Benjamin Netanyahu. But I'm not sure if Kamala Harris if she becomes president, is going to be better. Donald Trump probably would be stronger, but I think that there is a lack of global strength in leadership that has allowed so much of what has gone on to fester and to carry on. Last word to you, Warren.
Well, you won't be surprised to hear that I completely disagree with you. Biden and Harris sent $25 billion, with a B, in armaments to Israel 2 weeks ago. She's been unequivocal in her support for Israel. That's what we expect of leaders in the West and allies of Israel. That's not been the case for the Trudeau government. But I reject any suggestion that Biden and Harris have been anything less than what Trump has been, which has been friends
except
of
for
Israel.
Except for on Iran. They didn't keep those sanctions in.
And they made a mistake on Iran. Yeah. They deserve criticism for that. But where are we going to be a year from now? Hamas is not a traditional army. Hezbollah more is. I don't know if we're going to defeat Hezbollah, but Hamas is largely defeated now. But this has always been, to me, a three-part struggle. You defeat Hamas as much as you can, wipe out their leadership. The leadership of Hezbollah has been wiped out, but their soldiers have not. Those armaments still are there. And Iran, of course, is still a threat in terms of funding and supplying. But Iran doesn't have, for example, an air force. So if Israel decides, as I think it must, to take action against Iran for what took place this week, with the support of Jordan, with the support of the United States and others, I think they're going to get what they want. But a year from now, is the beast of anti-Semitism ever going to die? I keep hoping that it does, but it never seems to.
To all of our Jewish friends in Canada and in and around the world, Shana Tova. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and go to thetorontosun.com. You'll find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.